Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling this meeting of the Committee on Taxes to order for April 11th, 2024. First item on our agenda is approval of two sets of minutes. The first is from April 4th, 2024. Vice Chair Norris, do I have a motion?
Chair Gomez, I move the minutes from the April 4th meeting.
Vice Chair Norris has moved the minutes from April 4th. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. The minutes for April 4th, 2024 are adopted. Next item is approval of the minutes for April 9th, 2024. Vice Chair Norris, do I have a motion?
Chair Gomez, I move adoption of the April 9th minutes.
Vice Chair Norris has moved adoption of the minutes for April 9th, 2024. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. The minutes for April 9th, 2024 are adopted. The first item on our agenda today is House File 5075 from Chair Lee. I will move that House File 5075 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. Chair Lee, welcome to the committee. To your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This is only, I believe, my second time ever in my 8 years here in the tax committee, so just want to say really great to be here. So House File 5075, Madam Chair, I'll be short with the explanation of the bill, and then my testifiers can talk about why we are coming before you.
Oh, Chair, should we do the DE2 actually before you get started with your
Yes,
comments?
please.
All right, so the Chair Lee has an author's amendment, delete all. I'm going to move the DE2, and then we're going to discuss the bill overall, if that's okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of the DE2 to House File 5075, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. The DE2 to House File 5075 is adopted, and the bill is in the shape the author would like. Sorry for that, Chair Lee. To your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So the bill as amended provides for a one-time aid of $7 million to local governments to help offset costs incurred in 2020 or later for treating or removing a tree that has been found to be infested with ash borer and has been required by state law or a municipal ordinance to be treated or removed. The Department of Revenue must create a process to distribute the funds to eligible governments on a distribution formula or through an open application process for a competitive grant program. And the program must prioritize distributing aid to local government based on the rate of EAB infestations on residential properties, the ability of the local government's residents to pay for eligible costs, and the population of the eligible local government. And the department must consult with the commissioners of Ag and Natural Resources when establishing the process, and aids are to be reimbursed to eligible homeowners with incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level. And Chair, that's it, and I'd like to turn it over to testifiers.
Great. Thank you, Chair Lee. So first up on the list of testifiers is Laura Jones, and then I have C. Terrence Anderson on deck. Welcome to the committee. Thanks for being with us today. Please just say your name as you're getting started with your testimony, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to testify today on behalf of HF 5075. My name is Laura Jones, and I'm a North Minneapolis resident. I bought my house in 2020, and at the time, I knew the 2 ash trees on our property would eventually need to be addressed. I've worked in the environmental sector for many years, and I'm familiar with emerald ash borer, its devastating impacts, and the risks EAB poses to urban tree canopy, as well as the communities that rely on this natural cover. Needless to say, I expected to be personally impacted by EAB at some point. What I was not ready for was to have the Minneapolis Park Board enter my private yard without consent and spray paint our trees without so much as a phone call or a knock. The approach left me, my spouse, and our neighbors feeling not just blindsided but targeted, which was cemented for me after speaking with friends and former neighbors in South Minneapolis, from whom I learned no such actions were carried out in their private yards. This all happened in winter when nothing could be immediately done, thus needlessly diminishing the visual quality in our neighborhood as well as the psychological and quality of life benefits that urban trees provide. In the immediate aftermath, I reached out to the Park Board to inquire about available resources for homeowners unable to afford the costly expense within the city's imposed timeline, and was informed that no such resources existed, that they were hoping to have a financial hardship program in place by fall, but in the interim that we were effectively on our own. The following summer, I received a notice stapled to our trees stating that we had 10 days to have them taken down. This was in August, flying in the face of MDA guidance that ash trees are not to be removed between the months of May and October, when the invasive pest is most active. So with an inexplicable yet looming deadline and no financial assistance options in sight, many Northsiders had to scramble to come up with funds needed to get their trees removed in time to avoid the costly bill from the park board. For my family, this meant taking out a loan, which has required both my husband and I working second jobs to pay back. This is just one family story of hundreds, no doubt, who have been negatively impacted financially, psychologically, and physically by the forced removal of ash trees on private property. I urge you to consider households like mine that have been disproportionately impacted by EAB, the city's response to it, and the overall loss of urban tree canopy in our neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up, C. Terrence Anderson. Good to see you, Mr. Anderson. It's been a while.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee. Please just say your name as you're getting started with your testimony, please.
Absolutely. Yes, members of the committee, Chair, thank you for having me. My name is C. Terrence Anderson, Director of Community-Based Research at the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, or CURA, at the University of Minnesota. Just to build off the previous testifier and to sort of state my relationship with this issue, I am both a Northside resident and I also have an emerald ash tree on my property that was also engaged by the Minneapolis Park Board in this way. What I wish to speak more further about is our research on this particular topic as it might affect the greater populations, not just in the north side of Minneapolis, but perhaps in Minnesota as a whole. I urge members to think about this issue both as an issue of livability, an issue of affordability, and displacement and gentrification. CURA has conducted a gentrification and displacement research report that was conducted in 2017, which documented issues generally of affordability in this area. We know that residents in North Minneapolis and beyond are struggling to stay in their homes, both at a cost perspective and at a livability perspective. When trees are removed in the way that the Minneapolis Park Board was recommending, it costs several thousands of dollars. And as the previous testifier noted, that can be very much an issue of an ability to pay. And that's not just in the north side of Minneapolis. We see that consistently and constantly throughout the state of Minnesota, often in areas where there's a high concentration of emerald ash borer. Also, as an issue with ethics, I urge members to see it. For a lot of members, what we've seen in our research, we've seen a measure of deception. For me, I learned that you can treat your tree for much cheaper cost than the removal of my tree. For example, $250 about every 2 years, in comparison to $5,000 or up to remove a tree. Members, we've seen in our research in North Minneapolis that folks were not given that option to pursue that, which might be a more affordable way to do it. So when thinking about this in the concept of retro pay, we have to think about this as an issue of ethics in which people were deceived, and we might need to repair that harm that was done as well too. Again, I'm here from North Minneapolis and from the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs. I'm sorry, from the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs studying North Minneapolis, but we also see that these are issues around Minnesota as well too. I'm sure members know that folks in their communities can't afford growing costs of groceries, growing costs of housing. Again, this could be sort of added on top of that in a way which folks may not be able to remain in home, particularly folks who are income limited or have other issues of being able to afford growing taxes and other things as well too. So thank you, members, for the ability to testify, and it's great to be with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next is Kathy Abeen. Commissioner Abeen, if you could just, welcome to the committee. If you could just say your name as you're getting started with your testimony, please.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gomez and the committee. My name is Kathy Abeni. I was elected in 2021 as a district commissioner of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and I currently serve as vice president. Under the Minneapolis City Charter, the Park Board is responsible for planting, maintaining, and caring for all of the public trees in the city. Under state law and by concurrent ordinance between the Park Board and the City of Minneapolis, the Park Board is assigned the responsibility to deal with invasive pests and species. Also pursuant to state law, the Park Board is responsible for inspecting all types of trees on private property. Most recently, emerald ash borer has presented the biggest public health threat in terms of tree-harming invasives. Emerald ash borer originally appeared in South Minneapolis and has continued to spread throughout the city. Treatment methods using chemical compounds can prove effective if the treatments begin when emerald ash borer has spread to less than 10 to 15% of the tree. For trees that have a greater infection, It is inevitable that the tree will disintegrate from within and become a hazard to structures and even people when it literally falls apart. And so tree removal is the best option in those cases. Nearly a decade ago, the Park Board began fighting emerald ash borer by removing all ash trees on public property. This involved about 40,000 trees and a cost of about $40 million. As for the Park Board's responsibilities regarding private trees, inspectors identify private ash trees, look for signs of disease, tag them, and notify property owners of the need to have their tree removed. If the property owner does not remove the tree, the Park Board does. The cost of removing infected trees can range from $1,000 to $4,000 or even more, depending on the proximity of the tree to houses, other structures, power lines, and the number of tagged trees on a given parcel. The average cost is about $2,000 per tree, and I had a tree myself tagged, and it came in right at $2,000. If a homeowner does not remove an infected tree on their own, the Park Board takes the initiative to remove the tree through selection of a low-bid contractor. The homeowners are ultimately responsible for this cost, and the Park Board is responsible for notifying the homeowner of the cost and the procedure. If the homeowner does not pay the cost is assessed to their property as a special assessment. The Park Board has worked with the community to try to mitigate the financial imposition that is caused by the removal of infested trees. We received a one-time grant from the Margaret A. Cargill Fund of the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation to help homeowners who are unable to afford the cost of tree removal. We have also worked to obtain grants from the U.S. Forest Service, and in an effort to provide some relief to homeowners, we have also lengthened the amount of time in which assessments can be spread up to 20 years, although this does generate additional interest charges. We are still finding a need to help our citizens, and we are aware that other communities are facing this as well. Thank you for your time, and we very much support Representative Lee's House File number 5075 and would ask the legislature for help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bini. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Are there any members of the public present who wish to testify on House File 5075? Not seeing any, we'll move to member discussion. Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Lee, for bringing forward this bill. I think it's really important considering our combined districts. This is a major issue there, and so I am glad to see that there's some forward movement on this. My only question, which is probably another bill, but once these trees are removed, or if there's some other method to reclaim the tree, are there additional programs to help with replacing the tree canopy, particularly in North Minneapolis?
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's a conversation that we're having now, in the Environment Committee and also in the Capital Investment Committee that I chair on how could we provide some support for tree planting. I think we all know that if we were to look at capital investment, we could only plant public trees. And so we're looking at different avenues to see how could we help our residents with the tree planting too.
Thank you. Representative Agbaje?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative.
Great. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I had to step out to meet with some constituents, so maybe this was covered. In terms of are there other cities or places where by municipal ordinance there's the requirement that would be, do you know, Chair Lee, if there's any other places? I'm just curious. For example, my community, if the time were to come, would they be eligible for this?
Chair Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there are other communities across the state that are do have ordinances like this that's required. I can't point to which one, but anecdotally, I know that in talking to some of our committee staff, the city of St. Paul, and I heard the city of Edina, and so I think that this is an issue that's statewide and not just to Minneapolis.
Representative Brandt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can speak to my community of St. Peter. I can see 5 stumps outside my front window where the city of St. Peter is already in the process of removing those trees. And I'll tell you, and nobody else that's here on this committee besides the author of the bill has been in the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, but we're talking about trees that have the strength of a potato chip that are standing from the ground up. And so we do have to remove these trees because they do pose a public risk to individuals that are out walking and enjoying the communities where these trees have been massacred by these emerald ash borers are. And I know a lot of them are in my particular part of the world as well in southern Minnesota. So it's important that we continue to fund these projects because cities can only do what they can when they have the money to access. And when they don't have that money, then they kind of just sit there. And that inevitably is going to cause some real harm in these communities to people and property.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This goes back further. Someone said that this came first in South Minneapolis. Actually, it came across from Wisconsin, across Mississippi, into my district, Houston County, so it's my fault, and has spread up across the whole state. This is a very serious issue, and Chair Lee, thanks for bringing this bill. I do have one concern, however, in the summary from Nonpartisan House Research. An eligible local government, you have to be a town of over 10,000. In my district, we don't have any of those. We call those really big cities. So no, and you're right. Somebody said that this is out in rural Minnesota too. It is. Last fall on my farm, I had to take out 57 ash trees out of my farm because on my farmland, I don't want dead trees. And so we had to take out 57 of these things, and it cost a lot of money. I guess one of my concerns here is that that 10,000 should be stricken, and this should be opened up for any small town, because Representative Brand is absolutely right. I mean, these are dangerous trees, and they need to be taken care of very, very quickly. So I know this will go through the process here, and maybe we could look at it a little closer, because this is a problem, and I didn't realize that government could go on private land and take them out, but I guess they can, according to the testifier. This is something we need to look at, but I think it should be open to the state. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Davids. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Lee. I agree with Representative Davids. I was thinking the same thing. So many of these programs are only for cities of 10,000 and more. And I know we have similar problems out in Maple Plain and Greenfield in my district. So I would encourage us to allow small cities to participate. And also, I do have a little bit of concern that, like, the language is the department will either create a distribution formula or an open application process based on merit. Like, I feel like I have no idea what we're voting for. I have no idea what distribution is going to be used, and it sounds like, based on city ordinances, only 2, maybe 3 cities qualify. So that would definitely leave even Corcoran, which eked over 10,000 this year, out of it. So could you just speak to, like, do you have a preference, or why are we leaving it so open-ended? Thank you.
Just a reminder to members, we will be laying this bill over, not voting on it today. So there's definitely time to still work on it, but I'll just turn it back over to Representative Lee.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think to Representative Davids and Representative Robbins' point, this is being laid over, and I'm willing to consider, how could we make this as accessible as possible to all residents across the state of Minnesota. And I think, to your point around whether that's through a formula or whatnot, that's just a suggestion that, when I was walking through with staffs trying to figure out how could we maximize getting this out to, the most vulnerable. That's why, we are focusing on those that are below poverty level. I really want to address that piece. And, if you have any suggestions on, whether we do a formula or not, and just having more clarity on that, I'm open to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Davids and Robbins, for bringing up that point, the small towns. We don't have any big towns. So this would really be detrimental if we didn't have access to this. But it does point out a situation, this situation with emerald ash borers that brought up stuff that's been going on for a while. This, trees in these situations like this, there's drought causes the same issue. Or some of those issues with trees. Winter burn, we've seen things with pine beetle and pine wilt as well that can all affect these cities. So that when I see this and it's just emerald ash borer, what it's brought attention to an issue, but there are other issues that come up with other diseases and so forth in trees, And I understand this is specific just to emerald ash borers, but maybe perhaps there should be a fund set aside for other issues with other disease, other sickness in trees. So that, the one topic that we're discussing here is part of a much bigger issue. So, thank you.
Thank you. Chair Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Weiner, for those points. And I think that this does highlight just the need that we have across the state for trees, whether that's, through, some of the issues that you highlighted. And I think that's why, like I mentioned in my earlier remarks, in the capital budget, we're looking at how could we include trees for communities, across the entire state to address some of these concerns. And I think, what we're trying to do this there and capital investment is to address the public trees. And what we're doing here is mostly to address some of the issues that my residents have raised around, the cost for them to really treat these trees. And just real quickly, while I have the mic here, just to provide all of you a perspective, from 2020 to 2024, just the private assessment in the city of Minneapolis alone cost residents almost $3.4 million just to treat these trees. And I think, our park commissioner mentioned the average was around 2,000, but the range that the park board and the city of Minneapolis have provided was anywhere from $85 to $10,000. And so just want to make it clear that this is to help provide that retroactive relief for those that have been assessed. And to your point, we are trying to work through the capital budget to address future needs for trees planting and replacement too.
Thank you. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I made a mistake here. It happens so seldom. I'm not used to it. But if you look at the language on page 1 of the DE amendment, it says a town with a population of at least 10,000. A town is a township. Anything else is a city or a township. So smaller cities, and I apologize, smaller cities would be covered under this language. But even though, leaving a lot of townships surround cities and they're almost like urban, they would be left out. But the smaller towns in all of our districts, or not all of ours, some of our districts, would be included. So I just wanted to clear the record on that. I thank staff for pointing that out. When I saw town of at least 10,000, I'm thinking a city, but it's a township by definition. So I just wanted to correct the record.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House File 5075 as amended? Not seeing any. Chair Lee, any final comments you'd like to share with us?
Quick closing comments. Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate the discussion here, and to all members of the committee, I really appreciate making sure that whatever we do here, if this is to move forward, to include as many communities across the state that has been impacted by this pest. I think that it's crucial for us to provide some kind of relief and support for them, and so I really urge all of your support as this committee continue its work going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Lee, for being here, and thanks everybody for coming and testifying and being present. With that, I'm going to renew my motion that House File 5075 as amended be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill, and it is laid over. The next two bills are mine. Before I go up there, I just want to remind folks that if we use up the time that we have together here today, we can come back after session, or tomorrow at 10:30, we have that time also blocked off. So just for everybody to think about as they develop their questions for the next two bills. Representative Davids, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A very effective tactic. I use it all the time.
I learned from the best.
It's not our intention to draw this thing out. We do have some key questions on some of the bills, and
Yep.
we want to work with you on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I don't want to come in tomorrow.
Oh, I know you don't.
All right. As Chair Gomez is getting settled up there, we'll have Chair Gomez move that House File 4830 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. And I understand, Chair Gomez, that you've got an author's amendment. Would you like to move that author's amendment as well?
Yes, please, Chair Norris.
All right. Chair Gomez moves the A3 amendment. Do you want to describe the amendment just briefly for us, please?
Yeah, so the original bill kind of directs the department to develop a direct file system that serves 70% of taxpayers. After just discussing a little bit with the department, they needed a tiny bit of flexibility because they're like, okay, what if we get 68%? Like, are we in violation of the law? And so the A3 just changes it to say basically like, file a sufficient number of forms that the commissioner estimates that at least 70% of taxpayers are covered. So that was kind of just a way to provide a little bit of wiggle room to them so that they're not in violation of statute if they miss the mark a bit, but also point them toward what our expectation is around the direct file system that we're seeking to establish with 4830, excuse me.
Great. Thank you, Chair Gomez. Any discussion to the A3 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the amendment is adopted. Chair Gomez, anything further to the bill before we get to our testifiers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 4830 directs the Department of Revenue to establish a direct file program. We heard the results of Chair Joachim's bill on the study on free filing earlier in the session. If you look in your packets, there's a couple of just background pieces that I wanted to draw your attention to. First, there's a publication from ProPublica, which is pretty lengthy about kind of what Intuit or TurboTax. It's from 2019, but it kind of covers the previous couple decades of their activities with respect to, I mean, there's not like a nice way to put it, but I mean, they basically have effectively lobbied their way into killing any direct file program for decades up until the IRS started their own direct file pilot program that they announced last year. So there are just a lot of challenges. The other piece that's in the other piece that's in your packet is just a short Washington Post piece that talks about the data issues. That these for-profit companies that are basically in this situation where they're offering, free filing to people who meet income limits, are also doing what for-profit kind of tech companies do, which is taking your data. And so this Washington Post piece kind of just walks through like, hey, when you're filing your taxes this year, look out for the very first question that they ask you. And they kind of pose it in this sort of like, friendly, jocular way, like, hey, we want you to have the best experience. So in order for you to have the best experience, we need you to give up your personal data from your tax form. Now, the integrity of our tax system depends on the ironclad data protections that are associated with information that's on the tax form. It's considered sacred by the IRS. If you talk to our people at the Department of Revenue, that is like job one. There is no tolerance in the department or in the IRS for any breaches of people's personal data. They take it very, very seriously because in order for us to have a system that people trust, they have to know that personal data, which it's really like every single thing about yourself, has to have these ironclad protections. And so by turning this over to this for-profit company whose sort of whole model is based on, at least in part, on selling data and selling products that are not necessary, which is a kind of thing that has been outlined by the SEC. They've been levied, there have been multi-million-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars of fines levied against, it's not just Intuit, it's H&R Block and others, about their handling of taxpayers' data. So that's one issue that I just wanted to highlight. The other thing is about these sort of the for-profit companies, engaging in false marketing, deceptive practices. There's a kind of long history of, over the last couple decades, of them being held accountable for some of these practices. And so, a number of states already have their own in-house direct file systems, kind of a really diverse array of states with different kinds of tax systems and different sort of people in control of their state houses and their governorships. It's not really like an ideological thing. Most people's tax forms are very, very, very simple. Most people have wage income that they get on a W-2. They have, maybe they own a house, but, they're really quite simple forms to file. And, so putting together a system that serves those folks who have really simple tax situations and doesn't drive them to, a product that costs something is what we're trying to do with this bill. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. We do have a couple of testifiers. The first on the list is Nan Madden. Welcome back to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today on House File 4830. My name is Nan Madden. I'm Director of the Minnesota Budget Project, and I'd like to thank Chair Gomez for bringing this bill forward to create a direct file system. Direct file would give Minnesotans another option for filing their income taxes that would greatly improve their tax filing experience. With direct file, Minnesotans would have an easier, less time-consuming, and cheaper option for filing their income taxes. And having a direct file system that integrates with the federal direct file would add further benefits for Minnesotans by creating a more unified tax filing experience. Direct file could also increase the number of Minnesotans who receive the tax credits they currently qualify for, but that currently are left unclaimed, and it would also increase the effectiveness of outreach efforts. Paying taxes is how we come together to fund public services that Minnesotans value and count on. But with our current system, the majority of folks pay to meet their tax filing responsibilities. The IRS estimates that the average non-business taxpayer spends about 9 hours and $150 to file their federal return. And of course, the state return adds on to that. But currently, Minnesotans have only a very limited ability to access free tax filing options. Only 4% of Minnesota taxpayers file their income taxes through free tax filing options such as IRS Free File, through VITA, and tax counseling for the elderly. With current resources, these services are not able to serve all Minnesotans who are eligible, and there are income, age, and other restrictions on who can use them. Only a few tax preparation software companies offer a free filing option in Minnesota, and additionally, these free filing options do not always end up being free. Problems with free filing options include that some filers are redirected to paid services, or they are required to pay fees for amended returns, and that software companies are not required to be accessible or available to all tax filers who meet the IRS requirements to qualify, as well as the data privacy concerns that Chair Gomez raised. A free public income tax filing option would be a better choice for many Minnesotans, and Minnesota can build on infrastructure and momentum on the federal level and across the country. Starting in the 2024 tax filing season, the federal government is piloting a free federal tool to file and prepare income taxes called Direct File. It's available in 12 states, and 4 states are testing approaches that include their state income tax returns. 87% of respondents in a nationwide survey said they supported people being able to prepare and file their taxes electronically and for free directly on the IRS website. Minnesotans
Ms. Madden, if you could wrap it up, please.
Yep, absolutely. Minnesotans would save time and money with a direct file free filing system, and we encourage the committee to include direct file in the omnibus tax bill.
Thank you, Nan Madden. Next up, we have Eric Bernstein. Welcome back to the committee as well. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Norris. Committee members, my name is Eric Bernstein. I'm Coalition Director of We Make Minnesota. We're a coalition of labor and grassroots organizations united for an equitable tax code and a budget sufficient to meet Minnesota's public investment needs. We're happy to share our support for House File 4830, which would direct the Department of Revenue to create a free filing system that would target 70% of Minnesota tax filers. As the previous testifier noted, Americans spend billions of hours and tens of billions of dollars every year filing their taxes. This is an effective tax on a tax, and for once, it's a tax that we oppose. So potentially, we could all find some agreement there. We don't think it's appropriate for private firms to profit off of a public requirement, a public obligation that we require from the government. There are also concerns about accuracy. The GAO performed several studies. They found error rates as high as 94% amongst tax filing services. So potentially a state-run system could be more accurate, make sure everyone gets back what they're owed and pays the right amount. Error rates are also worse among EITC recipients whose costs of filing are higher, typically, sometimes because they pay for refund anticipation loans so that they can get their money back faster. This is like another feature of our current tax code that we feel is inequitable. I would say that in addition to the amounts allocated for e-filing on 4830, we would also support additional investments in in-person walk-in services so that folks who are less computer literate could find help filing. And finally, I feel obliged to say that I don't wish any harbor any negative feelings or wish anything bad towards people who do work in this industry, because my mother was a tax preparer for a while with H&R Block, and she loved that work and loved serving, her neighbors to file. So nothing personal, but we do think that people shouldn't have to pay to file their taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric Bernstein. Any other testifiers from the public who wish to testify? Seeing none, we'll move to member discussion. Representative Anderson.
I'll be fairly brief. I know we looked at this a couple months ago or last year. I don't know. Was it last year?
It was a couple months ago.
Okay.
But it's counted.
I guess a couple questions. The pilot is this year, and so won't be happening for a year from now, the federal pilot. And I'm just wondering about the timing of this, and because we're not one of the 12 states either, right? So I'm trying not to get too far, I guess, ahead of myself. And then Ms. Madden made some comments about the average taxpayer pays $150 to file their taxes. I don't know where that number comes from. I for years did my kids' taxes. I've cut them all off now, except one. So, and I used the free file. I used, tax, TurboTax, and, various things, and it was free. So they never paid anything for this. And I think a huge chunk of it's already free. So I'm just trying to talk about the timing. So, it's free now, so.
Yeah. Thanks, Representative
Yeah.
Anderson. I'll go to Chair Gomez, and then if Nan Madden wishes, she could come down and also offer some sourcing on that particular statistic. But Chair Gomez.
Yeah, thank you. So we were not chosen as one of the states to participate in the federal free direct file pilot. All of the states that were chosen to participate in that pilot have their own state-based direct file system, which is what I'm proposing setting up here. Well, the word that it looks like there will be future rounds of the pilot. We can't be positive about that because it's a different level of government, but, they have made, it's actually kind of like, it's a really nice interface. They've made a lot of investments into the direct file program. And so I think, the expectation is that they're not just kind of going to let all of that upfront investment go to nothing, and that the intention is to scale up the program. So we are, even though, like I said, there are dozens of other states that already have their own direct file program. We're seeking to join that group and hopeful that it will position us in the future to participate in future rounds of the pilot, because, if we just have a freestanding state system, you can't file your federal taxes using the freestanding state system. So what you would have to do is, it's not that big of a deal, but you have to put a number in, right, as a starting point. So there is sort of that, it's not like a seamless integration with doing your federal taxes. You basically would end up doing your federal taxes the way you do them now. And then, you'd have to kind of take the federal adjusted gross income and pop it over to the state form on the direct file website. And, that's not like a huge burden, and doing your own taxes is kind of a pain anyway. So there are things you have to do like that. But obviously, we would be seeking with this bill to set up a direct file system that is primed to communicate with the federal direct file system. And that is one of the directives that's in the bill. I'll turn it over to Ms. Madden, but I just wanted to, I was just messing around last night on TurboTax, and they have this, first you have to go through the data thing, like, do you want us to sell your data to people? And I said, no. And then they send you to this, to a next screen that's, how comfortable do you feel doing your taxes? And you can say, comfortable on my own, want help when I need it, want a professional. And I kind of went back and I did different scenarios. They send you to the same screen regardless of which of those you fill out, just FYI. So I said, I'm comfortable on my own. So what they said, based on what you've told us, without asking me for my income, right, because I do income qualify for free file. Based on what you've told us, we recommend, one option, assisted. File your taxes confidently with expert assistance. Get unlimited help and a final review from tax experts, ensuring 100% accurate filing and maximize your refund guaranteed for 219. Then you can go down the line. You can get full service. Let an expert do taxes for you, start to finish. That's $469. Do it yourself, your own taxes. That's $129. So, and these literally are the same options that they offer to you, regardless of whether you say, if I say, I feel really comfortable doing my own taxes, they're like, are you sure you don't want somebody to pay somebody $469 to do it? Because like, and the way that it's phrased, right? It says, get your maximum refund guaranteed. Make sure 100% that it's completely accurate. Like, why would I have to pay more money to make sure that my computer program is accurately doing my taxes when that's what it literally exists to do? And so, to your point, your kids' taxes are probably, pretty simple. I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I'll say like, I don't have background in taxes. I know it's weird. I'm the tax chair, but I did used to be like my neighborhood tax preparer because I kind of just liked doing them. I would do like my friends and people's taxes online, and I'd of course do them for free. But and they were very simple, kind of like I said, straightforward W-2, not a lot of deductions, exemptions. Nobody's an itemizer. But not everybody has you as their mom, and not everybody has me as their neighbor. And if you were to go into one of these programs, you very likely could say, oh man, I know I'm gonna get like, especially if you have a kid and you're a low income person, you get a couple grand back. Oh man, maybe I will spend $219 just to absolutely make sure that it's accurate and I can maximize my deductions. It's easy to see how you'd end up in that situation, even if like strictly speaking, you don't really need that extra help. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. Nan Madden.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The figures I gave before were an average from the IRS, and I'm happy to provide that source document to the committee.
Thank you very much. Anything further, Representative Anderson?
Thank you. So just to clarify, average of what people like me personally spend, I spend 10 grand on with my accountant every year, for my business taxes and stuff and personal. So it's an average of that plus the 70% that are free.
Nan Madden.
Representative, Mr. Chair, it's the IRS average non-business taxpayer, about 9 hours and $150 to file their return. So I think that's an average that includes people who pay more and people who are free. The average is $150, but I can provide that detailed document to the
Yeah,
committee.
I would be interested.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Chair Norris. Thank you, Chair Gomez. You stated that this bill kind of evolved out of Chair Joachim's report that cost taxpayers about $3,300 per page to find that it would cost anywhere between $2 and $20 million to conduct this sort of a thing. Did you take I'm looking for some methodology here. Did you take my recommendation, which was to stand at a dartboard and throw it at it to find the actual number? Because where'd $7 million come from, if you could explain that kind of methodology for us, please?
Chair Gomez.
Thank you, Chair Norris and Representative Olson. So I neither took your dartboard recommendation nor the recommendation that you yourself would do such a study for free during session. So, we have gotten if you look in your packet, there is a fiscal note. And so that kind of fleshes out with again, as I mentioned when we adopted my author's amendment, that I did direct them to serve a certain proportion of the population of tax filers with this program. And so, I think that was kind of like part of getting to an actual number. So there is an actual number in your packet.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Gomez. It does look very accurate, and it seems as though it was something that our department was capable of doing regardless of the finding of the report. So essentially, none of this information, if I'm understanding this correctly, came from the report that Chair Joachim directed. Is that correct?
Chair Gomez.
If you're asking me if the information in the fiscal note prepared by the Legislative Budget Office came from the direct file report prepared by the Department of Revenue, I would have to ask you to ask the Legislative Budget Office that question.
Next on the list, we have Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the questions I have, you referenced this before about the security of this new system. So I do have a lot of concerns about that. There doesn't seem to be anything in the bill addressing that. Could you just speak to that? And then secondly, it seems like this is rushed. Like, does the department really think they can get this together by tax year 25?
Chair Gomez.
Thank you. So there, I'll just say a couple things. I am not like a subject matter expert on, building a system like this, but I know that there's a system that's called GenTax that the Department of Revenue uses and a number of other states across the country use as sort of like the back end for their for tax administration. And my understanding is that there are certain states, like I said, there's a bunch of states that currently have a direct file system that are kind of built on that, like, I don't know how to describe it, scaffolding exactly. I'm not an IT person, you might discuss it or discover as we move forward here. But basically, like the system that like would be the back end for this program is like a tried and true system that exists that again, like I talked about, the centrality of data protection as a prime directive of departments of revenue across the country and the IRS, like to protect the integrity of the system. That is like built in to everything that the Department of Revenue does. And I mean, so the omission of specific language about security was not certainly to say that that's not a prime consideration as we're moving forward, but just to say that it's so embedded in the way that the Department of Revenue does their work, and it's just elsewhere in our statutes about the protection of filer data, like that exists at the state level and it exists at the federal level already, regardless of the form, that the data kind of takes. Those ironclad protections remain in place. And so, I mean, if there's a suggestion about a way to just make sure that that's, I mean, to kind of make spoken what's unspoken, I'm open to that. We're going to be laying this bill over, so we can certainly have a discussion about that.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just finally, I would say I'm concerned, as Representative Olson said, about the $7 million. The department in the fiscal note said they cannot guarantee that the filing system in the commissioner's estimation will be able to serve at least 70% of the resident individual taxpayers as required in the A3 amendment, and they talk about all the problems they're going to have building this complex structure. Now, maybe there's a fee associated with this tax thing that they can buy some scaffolding that's ready to go, but it seems like the state could be on the hook for a lot more than sort of what we've acknowledged with the level of complexity and the 70% requirement. So I just want to flag that. I think this is going to be a lot more expensive than we might be setting ourselves up to be on the hook for a lot more than we understand at this point.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. Any further discussion?
One more quick.
Representative Anderson.
Very quick. So I just want to, okay, so if the federal free file program is being piloted this year for taxes being prepared a year from now, we're not even sure if it's going to work, right? Hopefully it will. Then right now, like one of my kids, okay, would have to still use TurboTax or into whatever, one of these things. And then could take their adjusted gross income and then go into a state free program, you know, but they're still going to go through, until this federal thing is set up, they're still going to have the problems that Chair Gomez talked about, you know, like people trying to get you to spend more money. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about because I do it, right? It's many different tax forms, or do it last now. But again, it's a timing. I'm just wondering, because you're not going to solve those problems. You're still going to have the free tax program, not the one that's being piloted by the IRS. They're still going to do the same stuff. They're still going to try to charge. Still going to it's going to be the same. And so, and you would logically just go, yeah, go ahead and file my state return on the same thing. I mean, so but I would love to work with you on this down the road.
Great.
So if it's not part of the tax bill. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Chair
Just
Gomez.
quickly, the IRS direct file is live now. So it's.
Oh, it is?
Yep, it's being used. People are using it. They're filing with it. It's happening just in other states. And so, you know, your concerns are valid. Like people still, like I said, would have to, you know, file their federal returns how they do now and then switch it over to a state return. But hey, like, you know this, right? When you go through every step, they ask you, do you want that $469 service? Every step. So if we're taking off, you know, the final 4 steps on the state reform or state form, then that's all to the good.
Thank you.
And yes, I'll talk to you more about it.
Chair Gomez, any final comments on the bill?
Just thanks for the consideration, the conversation, Mr. Chair.
All right, and with that, Chair Gomez renews her motion that House File 4830, as amended, be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. The bill is laid over. The next bill is also a Chair Gomez bill. So the chair moves that House File 5335 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill.
Sorry.
And Chair Gomez, you have an author's amendment for this one as well. Would you like to move your author's amendment?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
All right, Chair Gomez moves the A5 amendment. Any discussion to the A5, or would you like to briefly describe the A5 amendment first, please?
Not especially, but I guess I can. Okay, so it does a bunch of little things. It deals with the authorization for bond issuance and whether it has to meet the bond limit. And can I just ask Ms. Hagler for a hand, actually?
Ms. Hagler, could you please describe the amendment?
Mr. Chair and Madam Chair and members, the A5 amendment is mostly technical in nature. Lines 1 through 9 are just some wording changes, and the section or subdivision that Chair Gomez was referring to about bonds just clarifies what's currently in practice for local sales taxes, that cities and counties can bond for these projects, and that they don't have to have a separate election or ballot question for the voters to approve the bonds. And then the final few lines are also just technical in nature, and the lines starting on 2.8 were taken from suggestions from the state auditor's office.
Thank you, Ms. Hagler. Any discussion to the A5 author's amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the amendment is adopted. Chair Gomez, to your bill.
Thank you, Chair Norris. So House File 5335 is changes to modifications to local sales taxes. We've had a lot of discussion about this in this committee. You probably have all heard my several rants on it, but I'm just going to hit some high points for us here. You know, so I'll go into kind of the detail of the bill and what it does, but you know, the situation is that we have, especially over the last 5 years since I've been in the legislature, have seen a major proliferation of local sales taxes in a way and in communities and for purposes that diverge from how they had been used for decades and decades before that. It wasn't until 2019 that there was sort of a high property tax wealth suburban community that got a local sales tax. Prior to that, it was just sort of the cities of the first class, and for some reason Mankato, I'm not sure Representative Brand what that was, but Mankato had one in like the 80s, I think, that was established. So sales taxes are, an important part of our tax mix. They're also the most regressive part of a major tax type, which means that low-income people pay a higher percentage of their income in sales taxes than higher income people. There's also this reality that, core public services that are provided by municipalities, the expectation is that those are met by a mix of assistance from the state and local property tax levy funds. What has happened is that over decades, as a percentage of our GDP, as a percentage of our budget, as a percentage of the need that cities have, the state contribution to cities and counties to support their provision of basic core public services to their citizens has diminished. And so, this is, to me, this is an outcome of that. And, you're going to hear from a lot of opposition to my bill. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And people who are doing their jobs. I mean, they're here and they're advocating for their communities so that their communities have the tools that they need to provide for their residents. And they are absolutely doing what they're supposed to be doing. Right? But there are just problems with this as being like a multi-billion-dollar tool in our toolbox. There's the regressivity. There's the issue about, the fact that this is sort of a political win. It's a political win. It's an easy political move to make, to say, okay, we're going to use this kind of tax that basically we don't have, the legislature doesn't have to vote on money going out of the general fund. The local elected officials don't have to vote on increasing their property tax levy. What they get to say is, oh, hey, a lot of this is like exported to people who don't even live here. And so this is like kind of a great thing for us. If you're sitting in the position of a municipality, like I completely understand why it's a very appealing tool to use. But, not every community across our state has a robust sales tax base. This, relying on these tools, reinforces patterns of inequity across our state. And so certain, Bloomington can put a half-cent sales tax in place, and guess what? They got the mall there. They don't ever have to think about, I don't know, they probably do, you do have to continue to think about property taxes, but it's a real windfall for that community. So you guys, I represent a community that, hey, local sales tax will raise a lot of money. Many of you represent communities, I think, that don't have that option. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we going to pick winners and losers based on the accident of whether a kid was born close to a robust sales tax base, or are we going to stick with our Minnesota tradition of equalizing resources across the state so that your quality of your life and your access to the things that we all need to have good lives don't depend on the accident of whether you were born in a community with a robust sales tax base or not. And so that's the challenge here. And politically, this is a huge challenge. And I'm, the latest tax chair to deal with this. Man, is this an unpopular, it doesn't matter about your political orientation, this is all unpopular. You guys hate it, you guys hate it, it's not, it's an equal opportunity one, this is. And I'm before you, I'm trying to find a solution that addresses the issues that I've identified and that still provides some tools to localities. It's like a good faith effort. It's a first cut. It's a work in progress. I have received a lot of feedback since we dropped the bill. I've read all of the letters that I've received. There's a lot of good feedback. I already am planning on making changes based on some of that feedback. I'm going to be listening closely to the testimony that we hear today, and seeing if there are other things that we can do. I have reached out, we're setting up meetings with some of these organizations that represent local governments to work through, kind of to have more of a working meeting and work through some issues that they've identified. So, you know, we can just like let the bloodbath begin if we want. Do you want me to walk through I mean, I can say some things specifically about what's in the bill. Or no, he's telling me to hurry up, so.
We've got some testifiers that
You
we're going
guys
to
have a
go
look,
through
yeah.
first. The first one is our state auditor, Julie Blaha. It's not often we get graced with the presence of a constitutional officer here in the Taxes Committee and a fellow Anoka County resident at that. So welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Norris. Thank you, Chair Gomez. Thank you, Lead Anderson, and members of the committee. My name is Julie Blaha, and I'm your state auditor. And I just couldn't have had a better lead-in for testimony than that. So let me just begin. And I am speaking in favor of our sections of these. I know sales tax is an important issue for the legislature, for local government entities, and I appreciate the effort to find some ways to simplify processes to go for a vote on certain kinds of projects. So after reading, talking with authors, talking with Commissioner Marquardt, watching the working group this summer, I believe from us, you're looking for something like this. Certification, like our assessments that we do for local government aid and county program aid, or occasionally in our tax increment finance reviews. And you're also looking for data collection and analysis similar in form to how our city, county, town budget and financial reports work. So as we work with this, you've seen what I've already offered as potential changes to what we do. We're going to want the process simple, as open-ended as we can, and giving us the time to do it. I think it will take some experience to understand the scale of the tasks, how easy it will be to actually align our assessments with your requirements. Again, we're going to need really robust standards to be able to make a really clear assessment. We'll also likely need to modify specific data and the granularity of that data over time to meet your needs as legislators. And as far as costs, our costs in this role, we are currently working on our estimate. We were asked if something like a percentage or if a more just direct appropriation would be helpful. And so we'll be asking for basically an appropriation based on number of staff, not a percentage like we do for, say, TIF. Now, we are listening here today a lot for the specifics of what people are looking for, what people are concerned about, to further refine our role in this. But we do appreciate the idea that you wanting to bring data into this, and we think that makes a lot of sense, and we stand at the ready to assist any way we can. Thank you. And I'll be available for questions as well.
Thank you, Auditor Blaha. Next up on the list is Nathan Jessen. And we are tight on time, so if you could try to keep your testimony to 2 minutes or less, it would be greatly appreciated. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, Chair Gomez, my name is Nathan Jessen. I represent the League of Minnesota Cities. LMC does not have a position on this bill at this time, but I did want to offer just a few comments for the committee to consider. I've also submitted a letter with additional detail. And first, I just wanted to thank the chair for putting on the A5. I think when it comes to the bond language, that's an important clarification for cities. We do appreciate the idea of not requiring special authorization before going to the voters, because so often approval from the legislature can be a moving target. You know, in the 2010s, a lot of the special authorizations were focused on like core city functions, be they roads or water infrastructure. After 2019, that shifted to larger buildings, right? So I think that, and then we also went back to roads in 2023. So that's just kind of an example of it's difficult for cities to navigate the process under the current structure. That said, a potential issue with this bill is it creates a narrow enough list with enough additional semi-subjective requirements that there's going to be fewer projects that qualify, and it's going to be difficult for cities to anticipate if their project would or would not qualify. And when they find out they have a project that maybe meets all but one or two criteria, they're naturally going to come to the legislature thinking they have a slam dunk legislative request. And then you're still kind of dealing with these requests in this committee. So our ask would be if the legislature is going to move to a process that doesn't require special laws, it just has to balance with what works and simple navigate with cities with its own policy interests. You know, I think there's still some work that needs to be done, but we'd be happy to work with the chair in this committee on that. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions with members on or offline.
Thank you, Nathan Jessen. Next up is Bradley Peterson. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and Chair Gomez. Good afternoon. My name is Bradley Peterson, here today on behalf of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. As always, it's a great day to talk about local sales taxes. No blood promised. We followed with great interest the work done by the legislatively created task force convened by the Department of Revenue and appreciated the months of thoughtful conversation that they had. To this bill specifically, there's just a couple of items that we want to highlight. We also submitted a letter that goes into greater depth about some of our concerns with the bill. First, we've long had a position that cities should have more authority to authorize these taxes under certain circumstances, so we appreciate the move in that direction. However, we believe that the list of available project types for city authorizations is under-inclusive, especially for the types of projects that are most likely to be requested by cities in Greater Minnesota. As the bill goes forward, we would urge the committee to include additional items such as community centers, airports, flood mitigation projects, and water and wastewater, all things that have been funded in local sales taxes before. Relatedly, I would actually draw your attention to the letter provided by the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Organization. They have, I think, some very specific issues about the Parks and Trails authorization language using the criteria from the Legacy 25-year plan, which was created for one purpose. This would take those categories and graft them into a different purpose that I think it's not necessarily well suited for, and so I think there's more discussion that can be had there. Additionally, we've got significant concerns about the requirements in Section 4, Subdivision 10, which has to do with the additional requirements for those communities that are coming to the legislature. Specifically, the requirement that a proponent of a sales tax authorization get a resolution of support from every abutting local government. That is a high bar. And I think the issue here and what we're trying to get at is proving that projects are regional. However, just because a community may or may not support by resolution another community's effort is not indicia of support or regionality, it's an addition of support. And we're a little bit afraid that local politics or parochial interests could shipwreck otherwise meritorious projects. So we'd actually recommend going back to more something along the lines of what is recommended for the auditor process with maybe 2 neighboring governments.
If you could wrap up your testimony, Mr. Peterson.
I've got one point and then a very nice conclusion. Thank you. Finally, we also have concerns about the equalization fund. We understand the impulse underlying that fund, but we are concerned that it adds unrelated costs to these projects and taxation for Minnesotans. So finally, in conclusion, Mr. Chair and Madam Chair, we very much look forward and appreciate already the outreach from your office to continue to discuss and refine this legislation as it goes forward.
Great, thank you. And then last on our list is Matt Mossman. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Chair Norris, and Chair Gomez. Matt Mossman with the Minnesota Inter-County Association testifying today, both on behalf of MICA and AMC. I want to start out by genuinely appreciating the chair's opening comments because I think we do receive this as a continuation of her championship, not only of local governments, but reestablishing the state and fiscal partnership and how best to do that. So really appreciate those opening comments. We know that the task force provided for robust discussions resulting in recommendations setting forth the conditions under which cities and counties might act to impose local sales taxes with some autonomy. Counties have a couple of concerns with the recommendations as reflected in House File 5335. First, we're concerned that House File 5335 omits the task force recommendation to allow counties to access the local sales tax base for some of the most expensive capital projects that counties undertake. We appreciate that counties do parks and trails and libraries, but for counties, most of the high-cost capital projects that we entertain are directly related to performing responsibilities assigned to counties by the state or in partnership with the state, such as transportation, solid waste, and criminal justice and court facilities. Counties do struggle with financing the high cost of those facilities, and we would recommend that those provisions be included. Not only do counties encompass a regional geography, but nearly all counties, the infrastructure that they provide serves residents broadly and workers that move in and through the counties and the region as a whole. Take, for example, that there's in your packet some information from Stearns County Administrator Michael Williams, who served on the task force, that really helps illustrate by a map how interrelated the state correctional system or the county correctional system is across the state. These facilities are subject to licensing and review by the Commissioner of Corrections, and replacement of the facilities is most often the result and at the direction and advice of the state. So we support their inclusion. And then finally, as others have said, and I want to underscore, we appreciate the goals and the importance of furthering tax-based equity. We do have concerns with the way tax-based equity is achieved in the bill, and would instead encourage tax-based disparities be addressed more through a statewide approach and distribution rather than a case-by-case for implementation of local sales tax.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt Mossman. Anyone else from the public who wishes to testify on House File 5335? All right, seeing none, we'll move to member discussion. We've got Representative Robbins first on the list.
Pass.
Pass. Someone wish to offer an amendment?
Two.
Yep. Do you have a preference?
Well, I would normally go first.
Lee Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'll move the A1 amendment, H5335A1 amendment.
Lee Davids moves the A1 amendment. To your amendment, Lee Davids.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Chairman, thank you for bringing this bill forward. Just a little off the amendment here, as far as reading the local levy advisory task force, and that was put forward by the last legislature, and I understand that. But I am very concerned about cities and counties not having to come to the legislature. We have good sets of eyes that we put on these projects, and not all of them make it. A lot of them do. I really think we're opening up a Pandora's box by not having cities and counties come to the legislature. That being said, the A1 amendment basically is saying, as it says in the report, and it says in the Senate bill, they include correctional facilities. I think Mr. Mossman was right on. That's a big expense that they are required to do, and this is a wonderful funding mechanism to do that. And of course, I'd like them to come to the state, but that's not what the bill says, and I know it's a work in progress. I'm feeling a little bit rushed here, and it hasn't been this side of the aisle. It's been taking all the time here. This is such an important issue, and I know I'm not the tax chair. No one knows that more than I do. And that's the way it is. But I believe that this bill itself deserves a lot more time, because the testifiers, I think, really had a lot more to say, but we're not going to hear that. I might just suggest that we put this one on the table, do the other two bills, which I think are very non-controversial, but that's not my call. So the A1 amendment basically says that we include correctional facilities as the task force suggested. And as I said, they can be great burdens on the communities that have to put them together. And I think if we went with this approach, that correctional facilities should be included. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. There will be a roll call. Chair Gomez to the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Chair Norris. So there's sort of like a, I don't know how you want to describe it, a safe harbor list, or a list of facilities included in the bill that would not have to come to the legislature for consideration. And those were, the ones that to me were really clear that they were a regional asset. Regional parks and trails, regional libraries, regional sports facilities, and convention centers. And I think it was Mr. Peterson who had some suggestions about convention centers, which I'm going to definitely take under advisement. But, there's nothing, I think that the question of whether a correctional facility constitutes a regional amenity, which was sort of like how these tools, I think, are intended to be used in a way. I think there's a question about that. These obviously correctional facilities provide a core public service to people across the state of Minnesota. They're all over the state. that kind of cover the entire geography. And so I think that there's just, some consideration about what the best way is to fund them. I think Representative Davids maybe referred to this, but, the Department of Corrections does find some of these facilities, and counties are in this situation right now where they have a facility that's been deemed inadequate by the Department of Corrections, and they're in a position of trying to figure out how to fund the construction of a new facility. Which again, it's like these are really hard situations that counties are put in particular, and these again are core public services. And again, these are amenities that like we have to figure out a way to pay for. But nothing in this bill prevents the possibility of a correctional facility having, being funded by a local sales tax. All it does is what Representative David said he preferred that we would do for all projects is it asks counties to come to the legislature when they are considering imposing a local sales tax for one of these facilities. So, I guess I would ask respectfully for members to vote no on the A1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion on the A1 amendment? All right, seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Gomez.
Gomez, no.
Chair Gomez, no. Vice Chair Norris.
No.
Vice Chair Norris, no. Lead Davids.
Yes.
Lead Davids, yes. Representative Agbadje.
No.
Agbadje, no. Representative Anderson, excused. Representative Brand.
No.
Brand, no. Representative Elkins.
Elkins, no.
Elkins, no. Representative Howard.
No.
Howard, no. Representative Joy. Joy, yes. Representative Koznick.
Yes.
Koznick, yes. Representative Lee.
Lee votes no.
Lee, no. Representative Listlegard, excused. Representative Olson B.
Yes.
Olson B, yes. Representative Olson L. No. Olson L, no. Representative Pinto.
No.
Pinto, no. Representative Robbins.
Yes.
Robbins, yes. Representative Smith.
No.
Smith, no. Representative Swedzinski.
Yes.
Swedzinski, yes. Representative Weiner.
Yes.
Weiner, yes. Representative Whitty.
Yes.
Whitty, yes. Representative Joachim.
No.
Joachim, no. Mr. Chair, there being 8 ayes, 11 nays, and 2 members excused.
There being 8 ayes, 11 nays, and 2 members excused, the amendment is not adopted. Representative Joy, do you wish to offer your amendment?
I do, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Joy moves the A2 amendment. To your amendment, Representative Joy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Gomez. This is a friendly amendment. This is coming from the recommendation number 8 from the Legislative Task Force, and it's a reasonable amount of funds and should be set aside for or for basically businesses. They had 3 defray administrative costs for the revenue and the state auditor, but then small business filers were exempted out of this, wasn't put in this bill. And this would put businesses to recap their administrative cost when we pass local option sales tax. For like their accountants, they got to deal with to capture this. And so this amendment is just to establish a grant, bringing this in out of that fund that's going to be set up for this local option sales tax. Thank you.
Chair Gomez, to the A2 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Joy, for this amendment. So my initial draft of this bill had Chair Norris's vendor allowance included in it, and it was $44 million a year. We could kind of cut it down somewhat and got it to about $12 million a year with some limitations. The challenge here is that this is like, to your point, right? One of the task force members talked about the bouncy house guy who moves from location to location and rents out his wares, and then when they go back to their office, they have to figure out what the specific sales tax was in the area where they rented out the bouncy house. It's not about where their business is located, it's about where the sale was made. And so obviously for a small firm, that can really, that can present a lot of challenges for somebody who's kind of trying to make things happen on a tight budget. And so so I definitely that's an issue. And that's part of the problem with having a fragmented system across the state. It's part of the problem why I personally think if we're going to, increase the sales tax, we should do it in a consistent way across the board and then like deal with it from there. I don't know, rather than having this patchwork, because it presents all kinds of problems to have this patchwork. So, you know, the issue here is that I'm not opposed to this, but it collects 1% of the moving forward, right? Not what's in place right now, but moving forward, it collects 1% of future local sales taxes and puts that in an account that would, you know, then be available for this vendor allowance. I mean, the issue is that you know, if you kind of think through it, it's like, it's going to grow really slowly. It's going to take years, they think. Like when I talk to staff, it will take years and years for it to even be like $1 million, which would serve, even if you're just giving everybody $100, I mean, it just doesn't really go very far. And so, so this is, you know, like I said, Chair Norris has a bill on this. It was, to your point, a recommendation that came out of the task force. It is part of, I think, our obligation if we're going to accept this system, which obviously I think we should not, but, you know, I don't get to decide these kinds of things, but if we're going to accept this patchwork system, that we have to come up with a solution for this. But it's a very costly solution. And unfortunately, just retaining a 1% of the collections moving forward doesn't really get us there. But this is one of the issues, you know, that we're going to continue to talk about as we work on this bill. And I'm happy to talk with you more and with Chair Norris about it. But as it is right now, this is not really adequate to meet the issue. And so we're going to continue working on it. I mean, this might end up being the best we can do, but I just think it's worthy of a little bit more conversation. And so for that reason, I would ask members to vote no on the A2.
Further discussion on the A2 amendment. Representative Joy.
Thank you, Chair Norris, and thank you, Chair Gomez, to continue to work on this. I will recommend a roll call on this one.
Roll call has been requested. A roll call will be granted. Further discussion to the A2 amendment. Before we go to the roll call, I'll just add a couple of additional comments. I appreciate the sentiment you shared around my bill, my vendor allowance bill, Chair Gomez. It's a bipartisan bill. I think we've got Lee Davids and Representative Robbins on it. It's a bill that I'm very excited about. I think it's the right thing to do from a policy perspective. When I talked with the advocates at the beginning of this session about it, we were all kind of realistic about the budget targets that we were going to see this year, especially looking out into the tails, and appreciate you looking at trying to make it work and see if there's a way we could shoehorn it in. But I don't think that it's realistic this year. I'm looking forward to hopefully making it possible next year. I've also got a bill understanding the impact that this has on small businesses and you know, kind of just the inflationary pressure that they're under. A bill that I've been working on with Becker Finn, that would really kind of target what we're calling these micro businesses, businesses that would qualify under this particular amendment. One of the things that in talking with my business community about that particular bill, they really emphasized was you know, making it so that it wasn't too cumbersome of a process, especially compared to the amount of money that they might get. Kind of, is the juice worth the squeeze? And so I do have a little bit of concern, you know, given Chair Gomez, you're talking about the amount of money available, the application process that's included in this A2 amendment for the businesses. I guess my preference would be for us to come back next year when we hopefully are in a little bit better budget situation and hopefully kind of go for that vendor allowance approach and really hopefully do this the best, most broad and universal way possible. Any final word, Representative Joy?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Sabis will take the roll.
Chair Gomez.
No.
Chair Gomez, no. Vice Chair Norris.
No.
Vice Chair Norris, no. Lead Davids.
Yes.
Lead Davids, yes. Representative Agbaje.
No.
Agbaje, no. Representative Anderson, excused. Representative Brand.
No.
Brand, no. Representative Elkins.
Elkins, no.
Elkins, no. Representative Howard.
No.
Howard, no. Representative Joy.
Yes.
Joy, yes. Representative Koznick.
Yes.
Koznick, yes. Representative Lee.
Lee votes no.
Lee, no. Representative List-Lagarde, excused. Representative Olson B.
Yes.
Olson B, yes. Representative Olson L. No. Olson L, no. Representative Pinto.
No.
Pinto, no. Representative Robbins. Yes. Robbins, yes. Representative Smith.
No.
Smith, no. Representative Swedzinski.
Yes.
Swedzinski, yes. Representative Weiner.
Yes.
Weiner, yes. Representative Whitty.
Yes.
Whitty, yes. Representative Joachim.
No.
Joachim, no. Mr. Chair, there being 8 ayes, 11 nays, and 2 members excused.
There being 8 ayes, 11 nays, and 2 members excused, the A2 amendment is not adopted. Additional discussion on the bill. Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a joint passion for the chair and I. We spent a lot of time talking about this, and I would say that if you don't like this one, you really wouldn't have liked the one I would have written. I think that 30 years is way too long. It's beyond the remaining careers of any public servant, elected or appointed, that is ever going to approve one of these things, and so they'll view it as if it was permanent. I think there should be a hiatus between local option sales taxes for the same reason, so that it doesn't become viewed as permanent. And the other big thing I would have done is I would have added in prohibition against cities granting new retail tax abatements or TIF in order to lure retail to the city. Because that happens all over the country in places where cities have become reliant on sales taxes, and it has creates huge issues in terms of the land use patterns that develop.
Any further member discussion? All right, Chair Gomez, the final word.
I've said plenty. Thank you so much to the committee for the conversation.
All right, and with that, Chair Gomez renews her motion that House File 5335, as amended, be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. The bill is laid over.
Chair Vang, we've been seeing a lot of you in tax committee. Wonderful to see you again. I'd like to move that House File 2277 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. Representative Vang, I understand you have an author's amendment. I'm going to move the DE4 amendment. Do you want to discuss it now or just adopt the amendment and then talk about the bill as amended?
Whatever works for you, Madam Chair.
Let's go ahead and do the vote. So is there any discussion on my motion on the DE4? Yes, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, just want some clarification on this. From my understanding, the DE amendment is going to reduce the amount that agricultural asset owners are able to claim for a credit. Can you explain that? Is that allocation not being utilized currently? I think that it's a huge asset to potentially senior, agriculturalists, people who have owned land for a long time, to get incentivized to help the new farmers utilizing it. So is this fund just not being utilized, or are we actually trying to divert funds away from people who are being incentivized to assist young farmers or beginning farmers, emerging farmers into this practice?
Chair Vang.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative. So this is a bill from the Department of Ag's, the agency bill, and it's a fairly minor. It's not meant to reduce allocation or divert funds. It's just, I think the significant change is the dates. So it's to allow the agency or the Rural Finance Authority more time to distribute the credits.
Representative Olson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question is, on the second page here of the DE, it talks about changing to $4 million each taxable year, when the original version that you're proposing in this bill is changing it from the $5 million to $5.7 million for each taxable year, going to the owners of agricultural assets. Can you explain that, please?
Madam Chair, I believe the department is here.
Is there anybody from the Department of Agriculture that can come up and address Representative Olson's question? Great. Please just identify yourself for the record as you get started with your response.
Hello, my name is Jenny Heck. I am the program administrator for this tax credit at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. However, I am not familiar with this exact change in the budget. I know that in 2023, we had $6.5 million available for these tax credits. And then last spring, last session, it was reduced to 4 million annually.
Great. We're actually just going to go over to nonpartisan research. Mr. Clayman?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Olson. So the changes from lines 2.4 to 2.6, really all that's doing is deleting obsolete language related to tax year 2023. So the way that the law was, the way that it is now, it's already at 4 million. And so this would just delete all the obsolete language and just clarify that 4 million going forward.
Good question. You good, Representative Olson? All right, great. So back to you, Chair Vang.
Madam Chair, so the DE4 is a fairly minor bill compared to the earlier conversation. So I think it's pretty bipartisan too as well. So that's the gist of the DE4, and I encourage the support.
Okay, we haven't adopted the amendment yet. All those in favor of adopting the DE4 to House File 2277, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. The DE is adopted. The form is, or the bill is in the form that the author would like. Chair Vang, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the House File 2277 as amended is under current law, the Rural Finance Authority must allocate 50% of new credits each year to eligible owners of agriculture assets who sell rent to emerging farmers and also beginning farmers. So any unused credits will be eligible to any other owners, eligible owners. And so I think that, like I said before, the major change of this bill will be just making sure the dates are giving the agency more time to allocate these credits. And I believe my testifier can also explain with better details with me too as well.
Great. Welcome back. We're short on time, so if we could just make it quick, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think Chair Vang covered it very well. It takes a while to process these applications, so it's helpful to have a couple more months.
Excellent. Is there any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Chair Vang, any final comments?
No, thank you for the committee's time. Good to see you guys again.
Excellent. You're welcome back anytime. With that, I'm going to renew my motion that House File 2270, oh, sorry. Oh, Swedzinski.
Sorry, I just literally thought this.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Madam Chair. Just a real quick before I move the bill for possible inclusion, I believe that's where it's going.
It is indeed.
Is there any, Madam Chair,
Yes.
a representative, is there any safeguards to keep foreign nationals from owning U.S. farmland at all as part of this?
Chair Vang.
Madam Chair, so as Chair of Agriculture, I haven't seen any bills currently in session that talks about that issue specifically. I don't know about current statute, and so perhaps nonpartisan staff or the department can specify more on that.
I just got a head shake from Mr. Clayman, and he will follow up if he has any further information. Representative Swedzinski, anything else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been in the news
Yeah.
quite a bit, a lot of potential foreign ownership of U.S. farm ground, and wanted to ensure that we're not giving tax credits to foreigners to purchase U.S. ground. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like the does need to be a Minnesota resident, though, in order to qualify, it appears.
Representative Swedzinski.
Madam Chair, but just also that they're not, a foreign, they're not foreign actors, or we have, if someone's coming in here getting a EIN, but on behalf of a corporate entity from China or whatever, that's something to be concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Swedzinski. All right, with that, I will renew my motion that House File 2277 as amended be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill, and it is laid over. Thank you so much for being here. Up next, Representative Bahner with House File 4728, and I'm going to move that House File 4728, the second engrossment, be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. Welcome to the committee. I understand, Representative Bahner, that you have an author's amendment, the A3 in our packets. Are we good to move that?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the last stop, we took a friendly amendment from Representative Scott, which we very much appreciated in terms of good data management practice. However, in drafting it quickly, it appears that we accidentally duplicated one of the fields in the report twice. So we're just cleaning up the language there.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Is there any discussion on the motion to adopt the A3? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The A3 to House File 4782 is adopted. Representative Bahner, your bill is amended.
All right, thank you. I'm going to speak really high level to the bill, and then I do not have any testifiers today.
We thank you for that.
Yes.
Although I'm sure it has broad support.
Yes, it does actually, Madam Chair.
I know.
Minnesotans participate in elections at very high rates. We have deep roots in tradition and participation in the democratic process. We value longstanding traditions of grassroots support for our politics. Last year, we made some historic changes to reduce the influence of big money interests in our and corporations in our political process in favor of small donors. A big part of that tradition is the unique program here in Minnesota, the Political Contribution Refund Program, that allows every eligible Minnesota citizen to contribute to a political party unit or political candidate of their choice. I suspect everyone here is familiar with it. So I will skip over the particulars there. But the state works in concert with the Campaign Finance Board and the Minnesota Department of Revenue to make these funds available to all eligible citizens. To date, the program has been widely successful with folks across the spectrum participating. Today, of course, this process is highly manual and almost exclusively conducted via paper. But as your resident IT person, I have to say, with this bill, we seek to modernize that PCR process, bring it online, make it easier, faster, streamlining it into an electronic format, meeting people where they are in the digital age, where convenience and accessibility are expected. The proposal before you uses the recently rolled out enhanced CFB reporting system to generate electronic receipts with unique identifiers for each transaction. In this new phase of the digital transformation, the CFB in turn will provide political party units or candidates with unique receipt numbers. Party units and candidates can either furnish a link to the Department of Revenue website so that folks can apply for their refund directly online, or they can certainly go the old-fashioned way and provide their claim to the Minnesota Department of Revenue via a paper form, as they do today for our folks who are a little bit less tech savvy. With that, the bill does enjoy bipartisan support in both chambers. And I will add that we are here today specifically to speak to Section 3, Section 290.06, Subdivision 23, which deals with the administration of the political contribution refund by the Minnesota Department of Revenue. And with that, I have no testifiers, but I do know that we have some folks from the Department of Revenue and I believe CFB in the audience, if there are any specifics.
Thank you very much, Representative Bahner. Is there any discussion to House File 4782 as amended? Oh, 4728. Oh, sorry, it's wrong on my sheet. 4728 as amended. Any discussion? Seeing none. All right, Representative Bahner, any final words?
It's great. Thank you for your support.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to renew my motion that House File 4728, as amended, be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill, and it is laid over. So we're at the weird time of session when schedule is a little bit of a moving target. So I'm not exactly sure when we'll be meeting next, but we will be meeting again, and we'll be in touch about that topic. Thanks so much, everyone. With that, we are adjourned.